Hi there folks, in today's demonstration I wanted to demonstrate how you can dynamically populate the run script action. The particular scenario is based on Excel files being in multiple document libraries, and the ultimate aim is to run that script across a similar file that's in several different document libraries. So within the solution today I'll show you a bit of troubleshooting on how we can get this to work, but also demonstrate a potential use case for the SharePoint REST API that will allow you to get some additional data that's required for this solution. So if I start off in my SharePoint site that you can see on screen right now, I have a document library with a folder, and within that I've got a workbook. I then have another document library, again with a folder, and another Excel workbook. And if I open that up, you can see it's currently empty, and I have a very basic Office script called a script to run. Now if you haven't used Office scripts before, I have several videos on Office scripts, but if I go into edit quickly, we can see that that script is going to put the words work into the cell range A4 to A6 when it's run. In fact, if I run it now, we can see there the words have come across. But I'll go ahead and delete that, and in fact I will change this to Merry Christmas, as it's currently approaching Christmas, and we can run that from our flow, but of course across these two documents that are in separate document libraries. So now that that change has been made to my script, if I jump across onto Power Automate, my aim is ultimately to run a script. And if I do a quick search, we can see here we've got the Excel Online run script action. And like you do with any of the actions within Power Automate, I need to go and select my site, which at this point in time is called Demo. The document library, at the moment I'm going to fix, just so we can run it on a single document library, called Documents, and the file again is fixed, albeit we will make this dynamic once we've done the first run. The script is, of course, called a script to run, and if I go ahead and save and test that, we'll just quickly close that Excel document, jump into our documents, into a folder, into our Excel file. I can now test and run my flow. And then what we'll do is we'll jump back across onto Excel, and we'll be able to see, hopefully, Merry Christmas 2022. So we'll just wait for that script to run, hopefully just a matter of seconds. And if I go back to my Excel file here and do a quick refresh, so I can see now I've got Merry Christmas 2022. So I'll just delete that from the sheet, and I'll go back to my flow, which is now completed. So of course I said I wanted to make the data or the path, the document library dynamic. So if I go into edit, and what I'm going to use for this initially is a couple of compose actions. I'm just going to put in the same values that we have for the document library and for the path, and I'll run it dynamically and see what happens. So we'll just call that compose path, and then if I go back to the run script, I can grab documents here, and we'll chuck that into the document library path, and I can grab the file, I can chuck that into my compose for the path, and then all I'm going to do here is I'm going to custom value, and I'll change that there to the doclib, and this particular one to the path. Now you'd think that that's identical, documents and a folder to the workbook. If we go ahead and test, however, and run this, I'm very much expecting it to fail. And you can see it's failed, unable to run the script. Please try again. And so when you open up that run script action, it's not really that clear as to what's happened. You can see you've got the document library there, you've got the file name in there, but it's not run. Now if you go into the raw inputs, you can see that we have the drive, which is set to documents, and we have the file, which is set to that file path. Now the drive is referring to the document library, and what I really want to just highlight, again, if you just notice it's called documents here. If I jump back onto the previous history run in Power Automate here, and then we can have a look at the history output of that action, what we'll notice once I get there is for the drive, it's actually using a drive ID. And yes, fair enough, we're using also an ID here for the file, but as another test, if I go into edit, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the document library. If I just jump into this here using the drop down, set documents, but I'll keep the file as dynamic. And if we test this, I'm pretty confident that it will run, which pretty much demonstrates that it is the document library or the drive ID that we're needing to retrieve dynamically, and that's when I'll show you how we can use the REST API. So that's run correctly. If I go into my file here, we can see that Merry Christmas has popped up. So I can go ahead and delete that, back into my flow, and we'll go into edit. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an action to send an HTTP request. And there should be one for SharePoint, let me see there. And if I quickly just jump onto this document, which I'll put into the description, you can see we have various endpoints here for SharePoint, so based on your SharePoint site, and then you can simply tag on the following, and that will give you access to all the drives and therefore all the data relating to your drive IDs. So if I quickly copy that string that I've got highlighted on screen there, I'll go back into my action and I can select my demo site, and the URI is equal to that particular endpoint there. Nothing else for me to change. And I'm just going to quickly put in a terminate so that I can prevent it running any further, but at least then we can explore the output of this REST API. So that's quite interesting, to be honest, because it has failed. And I know from building this earlier that actually the reason it's failed is because we're on version 2.1 rather than version 2.0. So if I go back into edit and I just change this value here to 1, I can go ahead and test and save and test. And I'm pretty confident now that this particular action will run fine and return to us all the drive IDs. So there we go. Now, if I open up the output, we can have a look on the right-hand side here. If I scroll down a bit, we should be able to see the drive ID. So there we go. For my document library, we have within an array, which is the value, we have the ID. And because I've got multiple document libraries, I have another ID. So the first one is based on my shared documents or my documents library, and the second one is based on my another doc lib. So if we just take a quick look back, I have my documents and I have my another doc lib. So with the results of that API call now, we can loop through the value array, and we know it's array because it's got square brackets, and we can retrieve that ID and use that dynamically in our run script action. Jumping back into edit, I can remove that terminate, and I'm going to keep the path because for my solution the path is always fixed. You could change it obviously so it was dynamic, but the main thing I want to show as dynamic here is the drive. So if I add an action, go into apply to each, and as an input, when we explored that array, we saw that we had an array known as value, but if we look here, we've only got body, so we need to extend this expression to include value. So if I go into expression, the little tip or trick here is to add a space. In previous videos, I've done a wee copy and paste from the dynamic pill, but actually I've discovered that if you add a space, you can jump back onto the dynamic content like so, select the dynamic pill, and that will give you the expression. Now I can delete that space. I can jump to the end of the expression where we've got body, and I want to put a / and then value. So that will give me the array at the value key. Now, of course, we're going to loop through that, and then we're going to run our script. And the thing we want to make dynamic now is this document library, which is based on the ID. So I can drag this script up into the apply to each. And then with the document library, I now want to make that dynamic using a custom value. And when we looked at that array before, we could see that we had a value known as ID. Now, in terms of expressions, we want to type in item, open close brackets, and then square brackets and ID. Now notice my cursor's in the way there. So that's your expression, and that will return the ID for each of the loops. So if I go ahead and hit OK, you can see the expression now saved in there. And if I go ahead and save and test, what should happen is our HTTP request will get the 2 document libraries. It'll keep that fixed path, but then it'll pass that dynamic ID into each of the loops, of which there'll be 2, and it will update both of those documents. So I'll go ahead and test this, run the flow. And whereas before we got the error on the run script action, we should now have it successfully complete for both 1 and 2 of these applied to each loops. So you can see my flows run, it's completed for both of those. And if I jump back onto my book, we've got Merry Christmas 2022. And if I jump into my another doclib and go into a folder and open up that other Excel file, we can also see it's updated based on that Office script. So a bit there about the SharePoint REST API and a link for you to follow and have a look at. And then also some expressions and how to obviously update a script so it's using a dynamic document library. I'd be interested to hear if there's anyone that's made successful use of this. And as always, please make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you leave a comment below and enjoy your Christmas, unless of course you're watching this in summer 23 onwards or something like that. Thanks for watching. Cheers. Bye.